In times of uncertainty, Bitcoin and the altcoins correlate with the S&P 500 pretty closely. Now, of course, Bitcoin is almost always somewhat correlated, as you can see, with the stock market. But this past year, we've seen many moments where Bitcoin was able to perform well without permission from the stock market. Though in a moment like this, where it is such a grand scale event that we're seeing across the world with Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Iran, it's going to be much harder for people to be confident to just bullishly speculate. When things are going well, Bitcoin can kind of do its own thing. When things are uncertain, Bitcoin tends to use the stock market as its confidence gauge. So there is no such thing as a full decoupling forever. It's usually momentary and then comes back. Momentary decoupling comes back, and it just keeps doing that. Now, we're going to discuss the Bitcoin trend, which is still intact. Actually, both Bitcoin and the altcoins are still in a macro uptrend, and we'll get into that. But now that this is the topic of discussion across the world, what are wartime markets usually like? And what you'll notice is that it's pretty random. There's no one size fits all for every war and every market environment. It almost looks like these dots are sort of just randomly placed on the chart, and that is because the way that wars affect the markets is very conditional. I'm throwing all of these points at you guys right now to make you think a little bit rather than most people who it's black and white, good or bad, up or down. It's almost never like that. Just remember that war can result in a variety of ways. Now, the initial rumors and the initial attacks cause fear. So almost always, whenever there's an invasion or something, the markets dump and then usually get bought up. There's actually a saying called buy the invasion, but we won't get into that. Now, looking at the parabolic trend for Bitcoin, this is something we've discussed a lot, almost every video. And in the last video, I was saying that Bitcoin's price could come back to the mid to high 50,000 range, and it would still be within the parabolic trend. In the last video, I said I don't expect that, but that was just something that I mentioned. And all that really means is that we're getting an exponential rise in the higher lows. According to the textbook diagram, there's no reason for me to think that we're not in a parabolic trend, because we are. The lows are currently exponential. Bitcoin can come down and wick into the mid to high 50,000 range, but as long as we bounce around that zone, it is still an exponential higher low, which means it's a parabolic trend, which means it's still intact. If Bitcoin was to trade sideways and then pull back, then the parabolic trend is broken. And that gives us an indication that the trend would be slowing down in momentum, and maybe we would actually test much lower levels at some point before getting support. But as of right now, we're still on the exponential trajectory. And also, this is something that might blow your mind, and that is the total 3, the altcoin market cap, is still in an uptrend. It is actually still in the same exact setup as 2020 to 2021. In terms of the structure, where it is on the trend line, yeah, it is actually still there. Look, 2020 to 2021 on an uptrend, upward sloping trend line, we actually tested near the lower high, the first lower high from the bear market, and then we saw a big correction, 30% down for the altcoins right there. And if you look at the total 3 where we are now, the first lower high, we got a resistance right near that, just like 2020, and now we've pulled back about 30%. The exact same percentage pullback to the same uptrend line around the same timing, more or less, the same structure. It's actually still a spitting image of the last cycle, even with this dip. And that's why it is always important to zoom out, guys, zoom out. The altcoins are just more volatile. It doesn't seem like the trend is being held. It doesn't feel like the trend is being held, looking at your portfolio value, right? But if you look at the chart doesn't lie, right? It's right there, uptrend line, still a macro pivot, right? So you look at this bear market, sideways action, alts breakout, that is a macro trend pivot. It's still here. A lot of people were really emotional recently saying that it's over. But this dip that we have for Bitcoin is no different than the size of any of these previous dips. Even after the ETF, we're doing good for now. Now, of course, there is a potential that if Bitcoin comes down, trades sideways, and then has another breakdown, that momentum would slow. And it could mean that most of the summer would be boring, be consolidating sideways, not much going on. That is a potential with the news that we're seeing, right? Because this can cause a lot of uncertainty. But as of right now, the trend is still here. And that's just what the chart says. Now looking at CoinGecko over the past week, they're down heavily down. This one right here, this line. Everything's down like 20% over the past week. If you look at the past 24 hours, we do see that most coins are actually slightly in the green, this middle row here. This is a potential area of stabilization. If the altcoin total 3 holds this zone, we can just continue the uptrend, and it would be a perfect uptrend actually from a weekly chart perspective. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, smash like, subscribe. Be sure to follow me on Twitter. And also I just did a collaboration video with Mr. M Podcast. Definitely check this out. I'll post the link below. I've done an interview with Mr. M. It was in January. This is our second one doing an update. So if you guys want to check that out, be sure to click that link below, and I'll see you all in the next video.